Hi! Look at this. You may be wondering why I chose to start what is nominally a rugby video with a clip of a piece of performance art exploring the relationship between befuddlement, pointlessness and abject misery. But what I actually showed you was, and you may struggle to believe this, a clip of a professional rugby team trying to play rugby. More specifically, this rugby team was the Ospreys. You may remember the Ospreys. They used to qualify for the last 8 of Europe, they used to win things, and they also used to be the only team that would make a habit of beating Leinster in Leinster. In January 2017, the Ospreys were top of the league. They'd broken the try-scoring records in both the major competitions they played in. However, if you fast forward to December 2017, the Ospreys are 13th in a league that in January only had 12 teams and scored about as often as me. This all culminated early this week in the Ospreys finally firing their head coach, Bridgend's resident moody Statham, Steve Tandy, which begs an obvious question. What went wrong? Now, there's no obvious answer, but there's a few obvious places to look, so we'll start with the most obvious of all. A loss of form to key players. So lately, the confidence of players like Rhys Webb, like Scott Baldwin, Bradley Davis, Sam Davis, Jeff Haslett, and basically anyone not called Alan Wynne Jones has evaporated into a puddle of pointless misery so quickly you start to wonder whether their lives were written by Samuel Beckett. Now, I'm not quite sure when Rhys Webb's form went out the window, but I'd wager it was somewhere around the 18th KFC bucket. Like 6 months ago, he was a lion. Now he's more like a tabby cat in as much as he's fat, lazy and orange. Well, a tabby cat or the President of the United States. However, this then begs another question. Why do players who, just a few months earlier, were scoring tries like this every week suddenly start playing like doormats? And this is where we bring in our old buddy, Mr. Stephen Tandy. As a player, Tandy was a great servant who spent 7 years at the Ospreys and put in 102 5 out of 10 performances. He then coached Bridgend for about a weekend before being parachuted in the Ospreys job, which was a job he only got because, like the woman I lost my virginity to, he was very cheap and happened to be in the local area. Now, I'm going to begin actually looking at rugby, because I've heard that's a good thing to do when making a rugby video. So I want to talk about the Ospreys' attacking game plan under Steve Tandy, which is something I think most of you will be amazed to hear actually exists. Now, the game plan is immensely simple, yet, if well executed, surprisingly hard to defend. It's basically a dumbed down version of what the All Blacks do. It's like, if the All Blacks are the game on PS2, Xbox and GameCube, the Ospreys are the Game Boy Advance version. That they're dumb, buggy, and inexplicably turned into a side-scrolling platformer, but there's nonetheless the core of a good game there. Instantly for reference, as this is my first proper video, that's the kind of old-school reference I'm going to be working with. I'm younger than any professional pundit out there, and I spent most of my childhood indoors. Get used to it. The plan's endgame is to create holes in the middle of the defensive line, which are then exploited by 2 first receivers, one on the forwards and one on the backs, who each have a variety of players running lines off them. So the 10 then scans the defensive line for a hole and plays a flat ball to the runner who's most likely to hit that hole. If your team's going forward, it's a very effective tactic as it requires a defence to fan the field and realign very quickly. In the meantime, the Ospreys are able to launch the next wave of attack. The ball rarely goes more than 2 passes off phase play, and when it does, it's usually a pullback pass to get the ball as wide as possible and stretch the defence. However, there's a lot of work that needs to be done before this is effective. If you're just picking runs without doing the work to open the holes in the first place, you end up with a clip from the beginning. So what the Ospreys weren't doing for the early part of the season was actually trying to open gaps, which is outrageous considering the one in Swansea closed in 2009 and Bridgend's a long way to go for cheap jeans. But when they are successful, there's a number of ways the Ospreys would try to open these holes. So one is the aforementioned pullback pass, trying to pull the defence as thin and wide as possible, a bit like pulling a jumper. Will eventually cause there to be holes in the middle of the jumper and needing to visit a gap store. The second way is simply by fielding Dan Biggar. Now, Biggar has such a huge arsenal of attacking kicks, and he's probably the best player in the world at hanging bombs, which kind of explains why he gets on so well for his Donald Trump Webb. At one stage last autumn, after Biggar had created 2 tries in 10 minutes off the boot, South Africa dropped as many as 6 players at one point out of the main line to cover kicks. This obviously helped open small gaps on defenders' shoulders when you start running the ball. However, the third factor is the most important. This is what the Ospreys weren't doing at the height of their woes. You may have noticed, when I described the game plan, I said it's effective if your team is going forward. Now, for me, so far this season, there have been 10 games out of a total of 24 in which the Ospreys have actually played like a rugby team. These 10 games, for me, were Claremont home, Saracens away, Dragons home, Northampton away, Northampton home, Scarlets away, Dragons away, Cardiff Blues home, Saracens home, and then just about Claremont away. We'll give them benefit of the doubt on that one. So beyond being the only Saturdays this season in which Alwyn Jones' wife hasn't come home to find any smashed vases, these games have one other thing in common. Like my opinion of an old person since the referendum, it's all about one position and one decision. So let's take a look at who played in the centre on those games. That's 10 games. Owen Watkin has made 10 starts so far this season. This is not a coincidence. Now, I'm not saying Watkin is such a great player that he magically, single-handedly turns a team who otherwise about as capable as a mouth and their neck into a wonderful, free-flowing, offloading team, although I'm saying it's because he's the only 12 in the squad who gets them going forward. When talking about a centre who gets you going forward, most people tend to be oversimplistic and assume this means crash ball. And while this is a very strong part of Watkin's game, there's far more to it. But for easy demonstration, I'm going to pretend all I'm looking for is crash ball. And in order to demonstrate, I want to take the most cutting edge piece of analytical technology in rugby at the moment. I want to really show off and use Gruffalo Skittles. People think the idea of sending a big bloody lad up to wallop the line is this. However, this kind of formation in rugby would be awful as it allows teams to run right round you. Incidentally, that is a little figurine of Alwyn Jones I do keep on my desk. So, in actuality, it's a bit more like this. But every time a Skittle falls over, the other Skittles have to retreat back to wherever the ball stops. This means that they move slightly out of place, they may need to jam in and try and help other Skittles out. It's more than just the momentum gained. By Watkin getting the Ospreys going forward, they're able to make a start on actually playing some rugby. They're able to create those holes by forcing players to jam in and move out of position. However, at the height of the Ospreys' woe, it wasn't Watkin at 12. It was James Hook. Now, James Hook was one of my first favourite players, so it gives me no pleasure to say this, but right now, the Ospreys would be better off playing a pastry in midfield than James Hook. To showcase the problem, I'm going to show you a supercut of his every touch in October's game against Edinburgh. Normally when doing this, you look to count his KRP, or his kick, pass, run count, but with Hook, there's an extra stat you need to throw in. Whereas Watkin is incredibly direct, Hook throws more dummies than a toddler desperate to show his parents he's over his oral fixation. For any Ospreys supporters out there, I recognise this game is the rugby equivalent of Dementor's Kiss, so in the absence of a Patronus, I'm going to try to lighten the mood by playing the first result that you get when you type upbeat royalty-free music into Google. Here we go. At one point, Hook had thrown 8 dummies but only passed 3 times. He passes about as often as a fit kid sitting A-level set by Gandalf. Like, the idea behind a dummy is that you think he's going to pass, then it's a surprise when he doesn't. With Hook, every time he shapes to pass, you assume he's going to dummy, then get smashed by a lad bigger than him and get knocked backwards. Which leads me on to something. You may have thought, considering the point I was previously making, the best stat to count there would have been gain line success. Except that would have been pointless, because Hook did not cross the gain line once. In fact, I revisited 4 games from early in the season in which Hook played 12 or 13 for this video, and between them, I only counted him crossing the gain line 3 times. And one of these was a clean break where someone was just stupid enough to fall for one of his dummies. Contrast that with Watkin, who consistently crosses the gain line. The problem with the Tandy game plan wasn't the game plan itself, it was that he seemed to forget what the game plan was, and pick players who didn't suit it in positions that didn't suit them. Although, saying that, there was one key problem with the game plan. It's generally grand when you're in the middle of the pitch, but when you get close to the opposition try line, defences throw everyone into a flat line and suddenly it becomes easier to find a hole in a World of Warcraft themed gay club. So you need to adapt your plan. And the Ospreys used to do this fine. However, this Ospreys team at the moment are so chronically terrified of losing the ball and blowing opportunities that they never actually try to take the opportunity itself. They need to start taking risks and trying things. Except it's hard to do when you're as low on confidence as the Ospreys are. They play like if they blow the chance, if they lose the ball now, they'll never see it again. So this leads us on to our next question. What could possibly have happened to cause players who were on top of the world just a few months ago to be so sufficiently lacking in confidence that they won't take any risks? Now, I want to make it clear that what I'm about to say is based on unconfirmed rumour. So there's every possibility that it could be what Rhys Webb would call fake news. However, if the Ospreys fan forum is to be believed, towards the end of last season, the Ospreys camp became a toxic place to be. There are more rumours coming at the Ospreys than a house of a Fleetwood Mac obsessive, but the gist is Tandy fell out with most of his players. A few of the more pertinent rumours include Dan Evans repeatedly calling him a twat from the sideline in the home game against Glasgow, a bust-up between him and Biggar leading to Biggar leaving his hometown club after 10 years, and Brendan Leonard leading revolt against the coaches, leading him to not make the matchday squad since October, despite not being injured and having 18 more All Blacks caps than Ruben Morgan-Williams, who's the 18-year-old academy lad, who's very talented, but he's being picked above him at the moment. Basically, to sum it all up, the rumours all suggest that the side's team morale has gone to shit. And this then comes down to the final question. Why? And that one final question leads me on to what I believe has been at the core of everything that's gone wrong for the Ospreys over the last 10 months. I believe that Steve Tandy has been suffering from depression. I recognise that this is speculation about a very private man's private life, but even if Tandy has not been depressed, he certainly hasn't been himself. And as someone that spent most of his life fighting depression, I feel as though we as a rugby culture have a duty to discuss and talk about mental health as an issue. I first began to wonder whether Tandy was alright while stood creepily on the sidelines before a pre-season game between the Ospreys and Leicester. Now, I run a poetry night, so I'm very familiar with the body language of depressed people, and I couldn't stop noticing Tandy's body language was completely different to when I stood in Walford Road 1 year earlier doing the same creepy thing. His entire frame had dropped. He looked as though he wanted to be anywhere but there. Despite being in the midst of the thing he'd so willingly dedicated his life to, the thing that had given him both so much joy and a career. Instead of his usual Bridgend Statham look, he seemed beaten down, as though he'd fought the world for 36 years and the world had just won. The next key sign was this.
Yeah, no, it's not acceptable. It's not good enough for us. It just seemed a total lack of energy in around what we do. I can handle losing games, but I can't handle the application. And I think there was a lack of application, not saying everyone, but there was definitely a lack of application in around that first 40 minutes.
He had a fair split where he did fight Scott, but when you put your hand in a fence where there is a lion, then he's going to get bit. So, and he's had plenty of warning, so it's pretty stupid on Scott's behalf.
It's very rare to see a coach blame his players, never mind call them stupid. So you immediately began to wonder what was going on behind closed doors. But then again, I know from experience it's very common and very easy when suffering from depression to blame other people, to shirk responsibility in favour of anger. After all, it's the only negative emotion as a boy that you're taught. So even though I daren't speculate on this issue until a few weeks ago, when an interview of Scott Baldwin seemingly confirmed my suspicions. Baldwin mentioned in the interview that Tandy had recommended him see a sports psychologist and told him that he didn't think he'd get anything out of it, but it's really helped. So let's look at Steve Tandy's last year. People were already on his back when the Ospreys were playing well, because he'd been around a long time and was nobody's dream appointment in the first place. So when the team proceeded to shit the bed and blow their best ever chance at European silverware before losing a number of key league games in the space of a few weeks, suddenly every Liberty Stadium season ticket holder, all 8 of them, are calling for his head. Tandy's a man who lives, loves and breathes this team. He's been involved with the Ospreys since their inception in 2003. To see them slip below their usual standard is tough for me as a fan, so I can only imagine how someone with the same level of investment in the team, through thick and thin, takes it when they feel that they're personally responsible. Now, I'm not innocent myself. I called for Tandy to go, often enough that it verged on a catchphrase, and it's easy to say this now that he's gone, but I'm personally sorry for mounting any further pressure on a guy who's struggling, whether it was depression or not. In many industries, it's not uncommon to see someone take time out to deal with their mental health, but in rugby we're so obsessed by physique that we forget that you can get mental injury too. Rugby culture prides itself on being tough, and whatever difficulty Tandy was having personally manifests itself as anger towards the players around him, which spoiled the camp. But this isn't Tandy's fault, it's because we live in a society that never gave him, as a boy growing up, the tools to tackle it. The clip at the beginning may not have been performance art, but that doesn't mean it wasn't the manifestation of one man's befuddlement and misery. I wish my solution to the Ospreys' problems could be something like they need to sign a new tight head, or they should counter-attack more, rather than we need to reassess and rebuild the role of male in society. But we as a rugby culture need to begin to talk about mental health. Had it been acceptable for Tandy to take time out or to talk about what he was going through, the whole slide into the Ospreys' worst ever season may have been preventable. There have been points in this last season when it's made me very frustrated to be a supporter, but I guess in a way it's been the time in which that word has made the most sense, because what the team that makes up my team this last year has needed has been support.
Thank you very much for sitting through that. Thank you for watching all of that. This has been my first video, so hopefully it was alright, hopefully you liked it. I'm hoping to do some Six Nations ones in the next week or two. In the meantime though, please have a lovely day. And I believe this is the part of the video I'm supposed to ask you to like and subscribe. I'm not going to do that, because if you then did it on the back of that, only because I asked you to, it'd feel disingenuous to me. So instead I'll let you make your mind up and decide whether or not you want to do that.
歩き出せる踏み出せる